Welcome to my world of fantasy. We are here to talk a little bit about some best ball and redraft exposure, calling this episode Full Disclosure Exposure for my fantasy football exposure for 2025. So I'm really excited to kind of talk about this. This is an episode that I've been meaning to do prior to the season. We are 1 week through. Today is Thursday, September 11th, and it is week 2, the beginning of week 2 for the NFL season. But before we get to week 2, I want to go over my exposure to fantasy in general, specifically best ball and redraft. So best ball, of course, we did 100 teams, so we'll go over that. And then redraft, we have 8 teams to go over as well. So again, full disclosure exposure episode here with myself and my world of fantasy for 2025. So let's get into it and kind of show where we're at with our best ball exposure for 2025. All right. So we have here all the stats. And as you can see, I did exactly 100 drafts in Underdog. So there is a couple different platforms for best ball. Underdog Fantasy is what I specialized in this year for my Draft Odyssey challenge that I did for 100 drafts. We completed it. I completed it for 100 drafts on the dot. I spent $591, so just about $6 a draft. We'll kind of go over some of those contests that I'm in, but for the most part, they were $5. There were some mixed in for $10 and some $25. But overall, our average was about $5.9 per draft for 100 drafts. As you can tell, this is when I drafted this year on the bottom here. First draft was 5/28, so May 28th. I did a couple drafts in June, the beginning of June, and then really took a break until July. So not a lot of drafts in May and June, just a couple. We just did 11 prior to July. Then for July, we really hit the ground running all the way up to 31. So we did another 20. And then, like I've said in a couple podcasts, the first week of August, which was my second week of my vacation, was when I did the most. And you can see this dramatically increased from about 30 to about 60, 70 within that first couple weeks of August. And then from there, I was pretty steady until the day before before the NFL started, and I just went kind of steady little by little, and we were able to reach 100 drafts for the entire year. So a lot of fun, and I'm really interested. And again, full disclosure, where I stand with my exposure with all these players. And it's pretty interesting because some of them, you kind of laugh at, some of them you're kind of surprised at, and some of them you're like, yes, I'm happy about that. So we're going to find out to see which ones are which for today. Before we do that, let's look at the contest breakdown just to kind of show you. So I was in 19 contests for the 100 draft team, for the 100 teams that I drafted. What that means is in a contest, you can submit multiple teams, multiple drafts. So for the most all year, I did an MMG Best Ball League, a $5 draft. I had 24 entries in there. Some of them are 150 max, so obviously I didn't do that. Some of them are 3 max. These flock contests are 3 max. I really like them. They're $10 contests, but there were 3 max. So no one can do more than 3. For the ones that are 150 max, I mean, I'm putting in 24, maybe 18. There's professionals that are putting in 150. So you kind of feel a little bit at a disadvantage because of that, which is why I like the flock contests to do 3, a max of 3, and get in there for 3. So the most I did was 24 for that. Puppy 4, I did 18 of them. A couple I did 10. And then for the rest of that, I did, the 3 maxes as well. So 19 contests, 100 drafts, and this is my exposure. All right. So let's start right at the top with my overall exposure for 100 teams, all positions. And we'll kind of go through each of these positions and look at them specifically. But this will show you a couple things, what team they play for, who the player is, my exposure percentage, so how many teams they're on, but also the fee percentage. How much did I spend on them? Which is different because if I drafted a couple of the same players in $25 drafts, and not as much in the $5, then they will show up a little bit more on my fees exposure because I'm exposed to them more on the fee side than I am on individual teams. For the most part, as you can tell, they're going to be similar. And especially because I did most of my drafts for $5. Now, the difference would be if I did like 10 of these at $100 and the rest at 5. Then you start to see a difference in fee exposure. And actually, we'll see a little bit of a difference in our fee exposure for redraft leagues because, again, some of those were bigger than others. For the most part, I'm a little bit surprised at the top 3, but not completely. So our number one most exposed player, are the player that we're exposed to the most, is Rashid Shaheed from the New Orleans Saints. Okay, surprise, definitely a surprise. Now you can also tell on this when I was picking them. So a lot of these that are high exposure is because I have access to them. I'm picking them late before the other teams are picking them late. You're not going to have a ton of high exposure to the first round or second round players. Now you're going to have a couple. So we'll look at maybe on this first page, the one at the highest draft amount was Jahmyr Gibbs, just at the bottom here, 20% for Jahmyr Gibbs. And I was picking him on average around the pick 5. Other than that, they're all higher, later draft round picks. Chase Brown, I was very, very high on Chase Brown. I have 25% Chase Brown, picked at number 22 on average. So that's interesting to look at too. So when you see some of these names like Jalen Noel, he's a rookie in Houston, Texas. I mean, very surprising, but it's, again, I'm getting him at about the 200 pick. So I just kind of kept peppering Jalen Noel and with hopes that he will go off. But for the most part, I'm not using any of those points or any of his production until late in the year, or if at all, but he's still a high exposure player. So number 1, Rashid Shaheed, a little bit of a surprise. Number 2, Romeo Doubs. I was ahead of the market on Romeo Doubs for a few reasons. Not so much that I want to go over those reasons on this stream, but in general, there were reasons that I was higher on Romeo Doubs, a number 1 receiver. Yes, Matthew Golden is coming into the mix, but somebody that's a little bit more steady. And I think I just was a little bit more ahead of the market than your average individual. And so I ended up with a lot of Romeo Doubs. I probably had even more of Romeo. I'm at 31% right now, but I noticed it towards the end and I kind of backed off. So a lot of my Romeo Doubs exposure is from early in the season or early in the offseason and mid offseason. Number 3 is Zay Flowers. I'm really happy about this. You know, we saw what he did in week 1. I'm really happy about his stack partner with Lamar Jackson. I was really happy about his performance and his production, and I was higher on him. We were just actually talking about this in the last podcast for Jersey Crew. I was higher than him than the average individual. He wasn't talked about that much. Of course, he's on a good team. He has a great quarterback, but for whatever reason, he wasn't talked about as much. And then number 4, unfortunately, hopefully he gets over it and is able to show some type of production this year. Xavier Worthy, number 4 overall, 30% Xavier Worthy. Usually when we look at this, I'm not going to go over line by line for every single player, but when we look at this, anybody that's over 20% is high exposure. So just keep that in mind. And this first page is all over 20%. But Xavier Worthy, number 4, hopefully his injury does not hurt his production in the end of the year, mid to end of the year. I really need that production from him. So hopefully that doesn't hurt there. The other cool thing about this, we'll get back to this exposure, but you can actually go up and you can click a player. So let's say we're interested in Zay Flowers, somebody that we've been talking about a lot. We click Zay Flowers. Now, this is going to give us our exposure to the teams that Zay Flowers is on. Okay. So every team that Zay Flowers is on, I have 40% Xavier Worthy. I have 35% Lamar Jackson. Makes sense, right? Because I'm going to stack him all the time that I can. Chase Brown. So if Zay Flowers goes off and I'm like, all right, how many of those teams that Zay Flowers is going off on has other counterparts that are also going off? I can pull this report, look at that player, and then see who he's tied with on most of his teams. The other one we talked about was Xavier Worthy. So we'll do the same thing for him. And of course, my mostly owned player on my Xavier Worthy teams is Patrick Mahomes. So that obviously it's a stack. 43% of my Xavier Worthy teams has Patrick Mahomes, but also Zay Flowers. So think about that. Now, of course, he's injured right now, but let's say he comes back, they play well, the stack does well, Zay Flowers continues to play well. That's really important to me. You also see Devon Achane on here, 30%. Dallas Goedert over 30%. So that's good to see as well. And I like to look at those from time to time to see how good are those teams performing. All right. So back to my overall exposure. 30% ends with Xavier Worthy. After that, like I said, we have Jalen Noel, Tyler Algier. That's kind of like a handcuff contingency bet on Bijan Robinson, which doesn't look good after week one. I'm not betting against him though. I think that's the wrong way to look at it. Just in case. He'll have some production standalone, but just in case something happens, I have somebody that I believe will go off in his absence. Dallas Goedert. So my number one exposed player for tight end is Dallas Goedert. I played well week one. Hopefully he continues that target share in Philadelphia, but he looked good. Rachaad White, same situation with Tyler Algier. Again, I went with a lot of first and second round running backs. So they're more of an even exposure with those. And we'll go over that. But what happened is because of that, then I started getting the exact same type of third, fourth, fifth running backs, which are these guys right here with that contingency upside of the injury to the first stringer. Chase Brown, like I said, that's someone I was targeting all year. Devontae Smith, Darius Slayton is in there. That doesn't look good after 1 week, but Devontae Smith is in there. Patrick Mahomes, my most owned quarterback at 21%. Justin Fields, my second most owned quarterback at 21%. And Aaron Jones in the middle there at 21% as well. So those are the players that I am over 20% on for the year. Overall. And like I said, the player that's highest on the draft board that I am mostly exposed to is Jahmyr Gibbs at 20%. So over 20%. And he was averaged on 4 to 5 every single draft. Devon Achane is there too. On average, I was getting him around 13, and I have 18% of him as well. All right, so one thing I want to do is just go through these positions. Okay, so we talked about Patrick Mahomes being my most owned quarterback. Justin Fields is number 2. Lamar Jackson is number 3. So congratulations to Lamar Jackson, who did really, really well, and Josh Allen is right behind him at 12%. I wonder what this position rank is. Probably, okay, so that's what they finished the offseason at. Okay. So that's where they finished the offseason. It doesn't count production after the season starts. Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen are two of my top 4 most owned quarterbacks. So I'm really happy about that. They're not as high as Patrick Mahomes and Justin Fields because they're a little bit harder to get. I was getting them in the second round almost third round, almost every single draft that I was able to. So they're not as high as Patrick Mahomes and Justin Fields, but that looks good right now. I mean, even Justin Fields. I mean, we saw what he was able to do in his first game. He did really well. He was scoring points on the ground, but even more in the air, which was surprising to see. So that's actually really promising. Kyler Murray is after that. JJ McCarthy is my 6th highest owned quarterback, and then Jalen Hurts rounds it out at about 10%. So. Not bad. I look at this as I'm pretty happy about being exposed to Patrick Mahomes. It does, unfortunately, it correlates with Xavier Worthy. So if I wasn't so high on Xavier Worthy, I wouldn't be as high on Patrick Mahomes. But because I am. And now, because of the injury, unfortunately, it doesn't look great to his receiving core. I don't know what he's going to be able to do. So a little bit upset about that for the Patrick Mahomes bag. Justin Fields, I feel really good about. Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. 3 out of those top 4 played really well week 1, and I am very, very highly owning each of those 3 top quarterbacks in Justin Fields, Lamar Jackson, and Josh Allen. So happy about that. Running back. Let's go to running back. Tyler Algier and Rachaad White and Chase Brown we talked about. After that, we have Bashal Tutin, Taj Brooks, which doesn't look good after 1 week. Jaylen Warren. So that's somebody that I'm over 20% on. as well as Jahmyr Gibbs, but I feel pretty good about that bet. Caleb Johnson came out and laid a dud. It may be somebody that they're not going to commit to and be loyal to, which would be great and would give Jaylen Warren much more playing time, snaps, and targeted percentage as well. I think his touchdown this past weekend was a catch, a receiving touchdown too. So that's great to see. Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery. So look how close those two are, which is interesting. So you have Jahmyr Gibbs. Oh, no, I didn't want to do that. We have Jahmyr Gibbs and then David Montgomery right after each other at just about 20%, both of them. For my running back. So interesting to see that they're pretty closely tied together. I did that for a few different reasons. One being that, hey, if one goes down, the other one is going to explode both ways, really. And I kind of give myself both outs. So I have two outs there. Devon Achane is right behind there, and then Bucky Irving at 17%. So happy about my running back exposure overall. Wide receiver. So we talked about the top 3-4 guys. After that, we have Chris Olave, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jameson Williams, over 17%. Hollywood Brown. So this was actually pretty good to see now that Xavier Worthy is out. So Hollywood Brown at 17%. I don't know if I would have guessed that. Let's put him up here to see what kind of teams I have with him. So on my Hollywood Brown teams, I have 47% Xavier Worthy, but not Patrick Mahomes. Interesting. Wow. So I just wasn't interesting. I never stacked Hollywood Brown with, oh, no, it's just because of wide receivers. I was going to say, wait a minute. Here, let's take this off. Okay. All right. So there we go. All right. So on my Hollywood Brown teams, I have Xavier Worthy at 47% of those teams and Patrick Mahomes at 35% of those teams. So that shows me that it's exactly what I wanted to see. Now, I haven't even seen this yet. This is the first time I'm seeing it, but that tells me, okay, good. We're in good shape. Even though Xavier Worthy is out on the Hollywood Brown teams, again, I own him at 17% of my teams. On all those teams, I have Patrick Mahomes at 35% of those teams and Xavier Worthy at 47% of those teams. So that's actually good to see. I'm happy to see that. All right. So we touched base on wide receiver. Let me see if there's anyone else here that I wanted to talk about. No, it's fine. And then last but not least is tight end. Like I explained, Dallas Goedert is my most owned player at 26%. And then it drops off. I mean, these next like 10 are very even between 10 and 15%. So very balanced on the tight end exposure other than Dallas Goedert. And I have a ton of him. Now, after 1 week, it didn't look bad. I mean, he played pretty well. He had a pretty high target share. So not too upset about that. But after that, it's Zach Ertz, Jake Ferguson, Travis Kelce, David Njoku, all at about 12%, 14%, 15%. Colston Loveland is my rookie that I have this year. Tyler Warren is all the way down at 8%. So I wish I had a little bit more of him going into the season, but that's where we stand with him. And then everyone in between is just about 10% or so. Brock Bowers is 10% too. He did really well week 1. He doesn't seem to be hurt, so I think he's in for a great year this year. I also have him on my Jersey Crew team, so happy about that. Trey McBride at 8%, so very even. George Kittle 5%, so that tells me I'm happy about that, because you know what, going into the season I was like, I wish I had a little bit more George Kittle. But now he's actually at 5%, which is about 5 teams. And he got hurt and he's out for 5 weeks. So I'm happy, almost happy about that, because again, he is not going to play for 5 weeks. And even when he comes back, I have a little bit of him just in case he still goes off. So that is my exposure. So again, these are my top players. I have a bunch of players over 20%. We went over some of the other players that just below. Devon Achane didn't look great in the first week, but happy about that pick around 18%, and a few other of these picks too. So that is my exposure for best ball. I just want to see if I wanted to do anything else with these teams. So the other cool thing about this, I'm going to go over my team exposure, but when I look at teams, you can do the same thing where I did with the players. My most owned team in general is Tampa Bay. Okay. So for whatever reason, I have the most owned in Tampa Bay. So you can actually look at those Bay players. I have 26% Rashad White, 17% Bucky Irving, 15% Jalen McMillan, 14% Emeka Abuka, and then Baker Mayfield and some other pieces. Don't have any Mike Evans, barely. Same thing with Chris Godwin. So it kind of gives you an idea of, all right, who do I have on this team? My second most owned team is Kansas City. Obviously, we just went over that one. My third highest owned team is Philadelphia. So we go to Philly. We got Dallas Goedert, Devontae Smith, Saquon Barkley, all over 10%. Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert over 20%. So gives you a good idea. Jalen Hurts at 10%. AJ Brown, who didn't play, I don't want to take any victory laps. It's just week 1, but didn't play well. He is my least owned Philadelphia Eagle. And then my last, my top 5, rounding out Detroit. Lions didn't play well week 1, but they're my fourth most owned team. Or I'm sorry, team. And then these are the players on that team that I have the most of. And then my fifth is Baltimore Ravens. And they are Zay Flowers. Justice Hill, did he even play week 1? I'm not even sure. Because I think he got a couple carries after Derrick Henry fumbled, and just in between his breaks when he wasn't just housing the touchdowns every single run. So that's my second most owned player on Baltimore, and then Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, Derrick Henry only 6%. I just wasn't targeting him, and doesn't look good after 1 week. So those are some other ways to kind of look at your exposure for best ball. All right, let's see if I can go to that team exposure we were just talking about. Okay. So you can tell that on all the drafts that I did, these are the top teams that I have the most players from: Tampa Bay, Kansas City, Philadelphia, Detroit, and Baltimore. So full disclosure, those are the top 5 teams. Over 54% of my teams have those players on it, and those are the teams that I'm going to have to root for this year. If I'm going to do well, it's going to be those teams that have to do well for me. All right. So what else do we have here? We have team builds. So now this is not as much about players as it is about the structure of my drafts. So I'll do all my builds over 3. So I have some random builds that, just were one-offs, but these are my most common builds for the 100 teams that I drafted. What does it say? 27% of them were 2-6-8-2. So 2 quarterbacks, 6 running backs, 8 wide receivers, and 2 tight ends. The other 26% that makes up over 50% of my drafts was 2-5-9-2. So 2-5 running backs, 9 wide receivers, and 2 tight ends. What I will tell you, so over 50% of my drafts, closer to like 52, 53% of my drafts were 2 quarterback and 2 tight end. After that, you can see I go with 3 tight end, and then I go with 3 quarterback as well, but not as much, only 9% there. What I will tell you about that build is it tells you exactly what I'm going to show you next, which is my pick tendencies. So I went with so many early running backs this year for best ball that I stopped early with running back. I only went with 6 running backs most of the time and 5 running backs most of the time, which gave me access to 8 and 9 wide receivers for those builds. So that kind of tells you the same story as this next graph is going to tell you, but just something to notice. And then it drops off significantly for 3 tight end, about 10%, and then actually 20%, because these are both 3 tight ends. So 20% 3 tight end, and then 10% 3 quarterback, which probably should be a little bit higher. To be honest with you, I should probably have a little bit more of a 3 quarterback builds. But again, this is because I took the stance on going elite quarterback for most of my drafts. So how many of those big time, well-known quarterbacks that I have in my top 5 exposed quarterbacks? A lot. Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes. He wasn't an elite quarterback. Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. I got Jalen Hurts a little bit less. So when I go with those highly exposed quarterbacks and elite quarterbacks, I'm going to end with only 2. So that's why the 3 quarterback builds is a very, very small percentage of my builds. And then let's go to the pick tendency. So this is an interesting graph. This one's cool because it will tell you exactly who you went with, the percentage of the time for each round. So round 1, you can see I never picked a quarterback. Running back was 70% of the time. So very interesting. Something I knew and felt, but interesting to see the stats. Wide receiver was 30% of the time for round 1. Round 2 was running back 65% of the time. And wide receiver was 23% of the time. So again, very close to that very close to that percentage. But what I wanted to see. All right, so let's look at this pick tendency graph and look at the percentage of the time that I went with specific positions. So round 1, 70% of the time I went with running back. So that's pretty interesting. That's something I kind of knew, but it's actually interesting to see when it comes to percentages. 30% of the time in round 1, I went with running back. So out of every 10 drafts, 7 of those times I went with running back for the first round. Round 2, 65% of the time I went with another running back. So very high probability this year that I went with 2 running backs to start the draft. Wide receiver, and then the tight end started to creep in there in round 2 with Brock Bowers, and that's about it. I never went Trey McBride in round 2. Round 3, now you start seeing the wide receiver increase. Quarterback was about 30% of the time. That was my Josh Allen's and Lamar Jackson's. Running back was 24% of the time when I didn't go with a 2 running back build, and then wide receiver starts creeping up, and then tight end. This is when I started taking potentially Trey McBride or George Kittle in round 3. And then you start seeing it open up completely differently, with round 4 being wide receiver 77% of the time. So you could tell, and that's what correlates with my build chart that we just went over. I went with a ton of elite running backs early, an elite quarterback early, and then just started slamming wide receivers in round 4 at 77% clip. And round 5, 80% clip. So out of 100 drafts in round 5, 9 out of 10 times I was selecting a wide receiver in round 5. Just a ton. And that tells you I was getting those mid-range wide receivers that I really like. This year, especially, I really like those mid-round wide receivers, round 4, round 5, round 6, getting those receivers because most of the time I was starting with 2 running backs. But interesting to see. And then it just kind of, gives you a sense of what type of builds I was doing the majority of the time. So pretty cool there. All right, what else? Team exposures we went over, draft positions. This is just kind of random, obviously, because every draft was random. And I got most. So it's funny. My favorite positions this year to draft from was 8 through like 11. So you see here 8, 9, 10, 11. My least favorite, but apparently the ones I drafted the most, was right around 4, 5, 6. I mean, the first 3 are good because you're getting a top 3 guy. 4, 5, 6, I got a ton of Jahmyr Gibbs here in the beginning of the offseason. But after that, I hated that draft slot of 5, 6, 7. And that's kind of where I was the most this year, unfortunately. All right. Wanted to see if I went over everything I wanted to with that best ball exposure. Yeah, pretty much. All right. So now we move on to redraft. I drafted 8 teams this year, 8 fantasy teams for redraft managed leagues. And what I do is I keep my exposure here to go over both the exposure out of the 8 teams and then also the money exposure, which is that fee exposure we talked about. Because some of those leagues that I'm in are a lot higher than others. But for the most part, all 8 are high stakes leagues. Number 1 overall for all positions is Dallas Goedert. So this guy better go off because I'm high on him in best ball. I'm high on him in redraft. I guess I wasn't really going elite tight end in redraft. I went once with Brock Bowers and Jersey Crew, but other than that, I didn't. And I ended up with a ton of Dallas Goedert. I'm also betting on teams. So, what did we just say? Team exposure for best ball. We also have team exposure for redraft right here. You can see this section. I think you can highlight it. Yeah, you can see it highlighted. So my top 3 teams are Philadelphia, Dallas, and Kansas City. So somewhat aligns with my best ball, but one team that aligns both top 3 in best ball and number 1 in redraft is Philadelphia. So, and it's not just Dallas Goedert. It's just I'm betting on that team. Dallas, the same thing, high-powered offense, and then Kansas City too. So number 1 player. Number 2, Romeo Doubs. So it carries over from best ball. I have a lot of him on my bench. I'm not starting him. Xavier Worthy. Unfortunately, I had him on 63% of the teams. I want to say, what's that? 6 out of 8 or something really high. And unfortunately, maybe 5 out of 8. And unfortunately, he got hurt. And then Devon Achane, 50% of the leagues for. Tet McMillan, I'm really happy about that. Devontae Smith. Jaden Blue was a healthy scratch. Not happy about that. So this gives you an idea of the players that I have on my redraft teams. Anything over, I think 3. So this is 3. This is 4. This is 5. So Xavier Worthy and Romeo Doubs I have on 5 of my teams. Devon Achane, Tet McMillan, and Devontae Smith I have on 4 of my teams. And then these players here, including Tyler Warren, I have on 3 of my teams. And that looks good for redraft as well. Jakobi Meyers, I have a bunch. I didn't have him a lot in my best ball. So that's actually kind of interesting. I wonder, let's see how much I had of him in Jakobi. One second. Let me see. Jakobi Meyers, yeah, only 9%. So not a lot there in best ball, but I have him on 3 of my teams in redraft. And then Tyler Warren, like I said, Zay Flowers I have on a team, Josh Allen I have on one team, Patrick Mahomes I have on one team. So a lot of players obviously I have on one team, and these are my players that I'm mostly exposed to. Some position stuff, it doesn't really matter, but the team stuff is what I wanted to talk about with Philly, Dallas, Kansas City, and Las Vegas. Unique players, 4 players from Las Vegas. I wonder why. Geno Smith I do like. I really honestly do. But who else would I be high on? I don't have Genty. I have Brock Bowers. I have Myers. That's interesting. Well, there you go. I'm not really sure why, but I'm pretty high on Las Vegas within my redraft team. So that is my full disclosure exposure. Wanted to kind of go over that and again be fully transparent and kind of go over how I feel about these teams and my exposure. And for the most part, I look at it like, yeah, this is my plan. This is what I wanted to do. This is what I came in to do. So none of that really surprises me that much. I'm happy about where I landed with most of these guys and most of these exposed players. And now it's just time to kind of really show what can we do? What can we do to finish the season strong with these same players that we drafted, make some moves during the year, and play as best as we can on the redraft side. And then on best ball, we kind of let it happen. And that's one of my favorite parts of best ball is you don't have to manage it. But looking over this, seeing where I am, having this tracker, shout out to the Salver from ETR, this subscription I have. Shout out to them. This program gives me the chance to say, all right, how am I doing without having to look at every single team? Obviously if Xavier Worthy comes back and does well, if Zay Flowers does well, if Dallas Goedert does well, I know in general I'm doing pretty well in best ball, and then I just need to fill in a couple of those pieces and hope that I stack them with the right quarterbacks and correlate them with the right skill players. So all right, that was it from me. That was a lot of fun. I'm happy. Thanks for watching and tuning in to my full disclosure exposure episode. I wanted to go over this. I'm glad I was able to. And now here we are to week 2 already, and we're ready to go. So I'm excited to see how this goes. And for everyone out there in the league, good luck and have a great year.